Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday evening, or it may be well into Wednesday, depending on where it is that you may be joining us in the world. But wherever it is, we thank you as always for all of your support. Thank you for making My EdTech Life what it is today. And as always, we appreciate all the great feedback, the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much. As you know, we do what we do for you so we can bring you some amazing content. More importantly, amazing conversations and amazing guests that you can connect with. As you know, that is our mission of connecting educators and creators and practitioners one show at a time. And I am excited about today's show because, as we were talking a little bit in the pre chat, I love to nerd out on this particular subject, being a former teacher of this subject for about 8 years prior to my transition into the edtech world of instructional technology. But I'm excited to welcome this evening Heather Brown. Heather, how are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. And like I said, I am excited about today's conversation, and especially because today we're talking about transforming math anxiety into excitement.
Yes.
And Heather, like I was telling you, a little bit in the pre chat, this is something that really is near and dear to me just because being a former math teacher in the classroom for 8 years, teaching from high school and then going down to fifth and sixth grade, the level of anxiety that is there, the level of pressure that is there, obviously, because of state testing, and seeing what I have seen many times during that time of year towards the end, that anxiety is just something that is not very healthy for our students. So I'm excited about today to learn from you. And so our guests can learn from you as far as how you can go ahead and how you are transforming that math anxiety into excitement. So, Heather, before we get started into this amazing conversation, can you please give us a little brief introduction and what your context and education is?
Sure. So I've been teaching since 2009. I had got my bachelor's degree from a small liberal arts college. Hey, Tanya! From a small liberal arts college called Monmouth College in rural Illinois. Um, I got my degree in elementary education and a minor in music. And then I decided to go back and get my master's, and this crazy thing happened that kind of went hand in hand with what my master's was. I got my master's in instructional design and technology in December of 2020. So you better believe during that whole pandemic thing, it was, oh, wait, you're getting a degree in technology. Here you go. And so I was really thrown into it there. But I absolutely love it. And I learned so much from being thrown right in. So I currently teach in rural Illinois, in Rock Falls to be specific. I live in Dixon, which is actually the hometown of former President Ronald Reagan. Um, I teach kindergarten through fifth grade math interventions and STEAM on Fridays. I'm lucky enough that our school is tiny. And so I actually get to wear more than one hat in that way. So I get to really push math into the STEAM world as well, which is really, really fun. Um,
That Absolutely. And that's one, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to
that's
say,
okay.
like, that is one thing that I love, like the way that goes hand in hand. And I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more as we kind of tell us a little. I didn't mean to interject, but I got so excited because of just that great combination of what you're able to do. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So on Fridays, we only have 1 to 2 classes per grade level. So I mean, really, really small school district. Um, And then on Fridays, I actually get to meet with each class, kindergarten through fifth grade, to do STEAM. And so sometimes it might be, one example is third grade when they do area and perimeter. We actually have them design a dream house for our superintendent. So they're designing it in Canva, learning about area and perimeter. And if they had to paint, they have to figure out how many gallons of paint they would need for different rooms and things like that. And then this year, we are going to actually have them design it to possibly 3D print it. So then we're throwing the technology in as well. So lots of fun things like that.
I
Lots of fun
love
things like that.
I love that. That is wonderful. And see, and that is so important. And I think what you're doing there too, it allows you to make that connection or help the students, I should say, make that connection to the math. And then, of course, what you're doing on the tech side with the digital lessons, like you mentioned, Canva. And then, of course, going into the 3D printing. And I feel honestly, oftentimes, at least from my experience, that we kind of miss out on those powerful connections because obviously there's a curriculum, you have to be at a certain lesson at a certain time, and sometimes teachers it's all about time. So sometimes they may not have the resources that are available, or maybe they just need just that little kind of just, hey, here's this additional resource just to make those connections and tie that. But I think just having students be able to think about those things and make those connections is clearly very powerful. And it'll kind of definitely ease some of that anxiety for sure. So before we jump in a little bit more, because I really want to dive in, and obviously I want my audience that's listening right now, and of course all our listeners that are going to be checking out this wonderful episode, once you get to share those resources. But I have to ask, and this is always one of the things that I love to ask my guests as they come on, just a little bit about that superhero origin story. And I know you went into education, but I always love to ask, was education always your first choice, or was that something that came a little bit later in life?
Mine was a fluke. Um, so I've always loved math and I've always loved music. So I actually originally, all the way through like my junior year of high school, I was going to be an accountant. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to work with numbers all day long. And then I realized there wasn't as much creativity to it. It was a lot of number crunching, which I love doing, but the creativity and the building just wasn't there. The connections weren't there like I wanted. So then I thought maybe I would go into music therapy because I like to help people. But they apparently really want you to learn how to play guitar in music therapy. And yeah, I can't play guitar. So I decided that wasn't going to be my strength. And I actually had a high school teacher who was part of the program we have here in Illinois called Golden Apple. And so he said, listen, I think you'd be a great teacher. I want to nominate you for the scholarship. And I said, okay, since I don't know what I want to do anyways, I may as well do it. So I ended up receiving the scholarship. And through this Golden Apple program, we actually lived downtown Chicago and taught in Chicago public schools for the summer. So here I am, this little small town girl. The entire county I grew up in had a total of one stoplight, was suddenly thrown downtown Chicago and was teaching in a Montessori school, fresh out of high school. And then it just clicked. It was, yep, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. So yeah, I can't say I always wanted to do it, but I had that teacher who saw something in me and decided, you know what, I'm going to push her for it. I'm
That
glad
is
he did.
excellent. And I'm glad you did because of the work that you've been doing, and obviously being able to meet you through, Amanda Fox, and of course the week of AI, and of course the work that you're doing. That's something that is amazing. And now I love that I get to chat with you and hear a little bit more about that story. And so as this developed, I found it very interesting, like you mentioned right now, that when you had just finished your master's, it was December of 2020, and we all know what happened during 2020 and that December. So you mentioned something like either somebody at your school or maybe an administrator saying, "Hey, here you go. You're working on an ed tech, or you have a master's in ed tech, so here you go." So can you tell us what package it was that they kindly delivered to you at your hands, knowing that you had just finished your master's in educational technology?
Well, it was one of those, well, we don't have anyone who really knows anything about ed tech. So you can figure out Google Classroom, you can figure out Seesaw, you can figure out any way to get our kids able to work with technology. And then in Illinois, in that fall, the students had the choice of whether they were in person or virtual. And so then I was really trying to figure out things for the teachers, and I was paranoid we were going to go virtual. So I'm like rushing around to figure out ways to prepare my third grade students at the time to be able to do everything virtual. It was absolute madness, but you know what? I learned a lot from it.
Absolutely. And for a lot of us, it was just really in that same way. I mean, I had just finished my master's I think in October of 2019. And then my graduation, when we walked, it was 2019 in December. And then, of course, May happened. And in a very similar form, it's like, hey, here you go.
Mhm.
And let's go ahead and figure it out. And that's the way it went. But I mean, gladly, it was great. It was very great to be able to serve our community of educators. And obviously, now what I love about it, Heather, and maybe you see it too, is now as I walk down the halls and everything, now the teachers are feeling a lot more comfortable with the tech, at least, bringing it out a little bit more. But I want to talk about now coming in, was when you came into education, was math the first subject that you taught, or was it more of a generalist, self-contained, where you taught all subjects? And then that's where this passion for math came about.
I've always loved math. Like I could have done calculus all day long when I was in high school. Now I don't remember any of it, but I remember loving it. Um, but I actually taught third grade for several years. And then the pandemic hit, and I was the only third grade teacher, and I needed a change. My stress level was increasing, and I'm lucky enough to work at a school that's flexible and supportive. And so they said, well, we want to support our the students who struggle with math a little bit more. And so they decided to try this math intervention position. And so I immediately jumped at it. And that's where I've been ever since. And then last year, I was like, you know what? On Fridays, all I do is progress monitor, and it doesn't take me very long. So can I do STEAM? And they said, sure. And so now I'm doing STEAM with it as well.
Excellent. So that is great. I absolutely love that because, again, like we just talked prior, making those connections. So I want to ask you, when did that moment just kind of click? Was it, I guess obviously during pandemic, I know the tech game was stepped up for everybody. So had to be a way to make sure that students connected and obviously do their lessons and so on. But how did being that interventionist help shape your approach in integrating technology specifically for mathematics?
Well, those students who I had, especially at the beginning, really didn't like math. They did not see how it applied to them. It was like the joke you always hear that when are you ever going to use this? When you're building a bridge. Well, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And so I was trying to find ways to make sure they realized that they could have real life applications. And at first, it just started with word problems being real life application. Then all of a sudden, I was like, wait, what if they could use it like they actually would in real life? Like making the design for someone's house, or doing things like making a brochure for a business and talking about sales prices and percentages, or making advertisements of videos. If it's $10 and it's 20% off, how much is it actually on sale for? Things like that. And the way they could actually see it being used in real life, it was just like a spark. And now I have the problem that students want to come back to me. So they will purposely bomb tests so they can come back. And then they figured out, though, I'll make them sit down and retake the test. So they can't do that. But as soon as they realize what it can actually be used for, and really, to me, math is puzzles and just fun games almost. It's puzzles that need to be solved and patterns that you can see and ways to create. It's not just time tests.
No, I agree with you. And, one of the things, and I'll be honest with you, like at least my experience, and I'm surprised that I even became a math teacher, but the fact that I did not have a very good experience in sixth grade. My sixth grade teacher, I did terribly in sixth grade mathematics. And I mean, my parents were called in all the time. My grades weren't very good. I didn't understand. I was just very confused, due to a lot of tutoring. And, I really thought that there was a problem, and maybe there was maybe a slight problem. But the thing is that I recall that as soon as I managed to kind of just, bounce my way out of sixth grade into seventh grade, but then all of a sudden it's like, in seventh grade, that light bulb moment, everything went off, all the lights were turned on. And I was like, wow. And then from seventh grade on, it was just a great experience. And so I can kind of relate a little bit now that I get to work with actually, I work with K through 12, but especially with K through 6 when I go to the campuses. And then, of course, starting January, I call it testing season because it seems like
Mhm.
everything shuts down because everybody's like, hey, we're focusing on state testing from January all the way to May. The pressure, the look on the students' faces, and then when it comes time to do some testing, just seeing students coming out of the classrooms crying with anxiety prior to the test. So I want to ask you, I know I'm describing that here on what I see, but how have you been able to leverage the power of technology? If you can give us some examples, I know you've given us the 3D printing and so on, but integrating a little bit more tech to ease that math anxiety. What are some of the strategies that you have found very useful?
Well, one of the things I do to help with that test anxiety and is more or less to give them little assessments or little questions every once in a while that are formatted like those tests, just so they know what to expect. Now, is that what I do every day? No. Is that what I feel is most important? No. But that way they are prepared. And I also like to give them examples of what would be considered a one, two, three, or four based on whatever rubric they are using that year. But they really need to know what to expect. And that's something that I did struggle with a lot because I do use so much technology and I have them create and I have them do so much, but then they're expected to sit down and type on a computer. And that's really tough for them. So honestly, I think the biggest help is just giving them a few questions every once in a while, maybe not even every day, of that type of question, because I need to show them it's not really that scary and it's okay.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great strategy. But like I said here, I wish that we would kind of adopt that kind of mentality, but it just seems like here it's go, 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 go. And the
Mhm.
students are just continuously just, worksheet. Well, some teachers are still doing that, but we've substituted now where it's not just the physical worksheet now, but it's just more of that digital, but it's worksheet.
Yes.
It's really, you just substituted the paper for the digital, but it really does not augment the lesson or redefine the lesson, or even slightly modify. It's more of just that substitution piece. So definitely it would be great to encourage teachers to show them how to really augment and modify and redefine some of those lessons, and taking them to that next level. Now, I know from my experience when I went into teaching, coming in from the business world, they're like, hey, you know what? You've got enough hours in finance and this for math and business calculus. So we're just going to go and throw you in ninth grade algebra. And I was like, okay, perfect. So, teaching math, one thing that I realized real quick was that I was teaching it the way that I learned it. But it wasn't until a
Mhm.
couple of years later, because again, not coming in from the traditional, pre-service program for educators, I kind of had to just revert back to what I knew. But it wasn't until later on, these last 7 years working with our content math specialist, where I learned the standards back and front, forwards and backwards. And really, I am surprised at the level of tech that can be easily integrated, and not in an overwhelming way that's gonna cause tech fatigue for the students, much less for the teachers. And so I want to ask you, when you're currently working on your campuses, what are some ways that you kind of also help put teachers at ease as far as implementing a little bit of tech on their side as well?
What I love to do is and I started doing this last year because, as you know, you've seen me at all these tech conferences. I love going to them. What I'll do is, instead of just going and saying, hey, you have to try this, I'm like, hey, I know you have a test coming up. Give me the review, and I'm going to use one of these resources for you to use. And then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, this is awesome. So, like, we have a fourth grade teacher who actually is right across the hall from me, who I've done every single one of her math reviews this year, because she's also pregnant and she has a larger class than most of them. And she's like, these are awesome. Can you keep doing this? And I'm like, yes, I love it. And so she's been using a lot of the Gina Lee ones with the breakout rooms. She absolutely loves that. And then I introduced Book It down to second grade. Well, they realized that there's already things provided with our reading series. And so it's one less thing they have to make. It's easy for them. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait, we don't even have to make it. So not only are they using the tech, but it's saving them time. Our fifth grade teacher absolutely loves Ed Puzzle. And she's like, Heather, we cannot get rid of this. We have to keep our school subscription. Help me keep it. And so I'm working on more ways on integrating Ed Puzzle for kindergarten and up, things like that. And it's really easy when you have them do a read aloud and then they answer the questions to go with the read aloud, because that matches with a listen to reading, and it's showing that they're actually really understanding the story. It's amazing some of the things they can do. And another thing I like to do, which I thought of this after you had asked me, with those questions that are based off of those tests. So I haven't done this since I taught third grade, so it's been a couple of years, but somehow I remembered here. Write the question down and have them respond to it using Flip. So that way you don't have to worry about them typing or anything, but they're getting their thoughts out. And then they can respond to each other. And we had one that the students, when they were responding to each other, they were telling them each other how to expand. And I know on at least the Illinois state test right now, a big thing is finding mistakes of others. And so if they found a student who made a mistake, they were meeting that as well, which was amazing. So it was meeting more than what I was expecting. And technology let that happen. And it helped because those students with reading IEPs could still do it all, because the reading wasn't getting in the way anymore.
Yes, absolutely love it. Like 100% to all of that, echo all of that. And that's so exciting. I think I don't know, it's just many times it's just teachers just kind of, once they get that little taste and then they kind of see, it's like, wow, like the whole world is turned around for them in a positive way when they're able to leverage the power of tech. I think it's just simply just that initial fear of the unknown, because I think for myself, since I work with teachers and I'm the one that rolls things out and we've got a new platform and, I visit campuses, my motto has always been just really keep it simple so they can really see the simplicity of it. And I just say, just get clicky with it. Nothing's going to break. Either click refresh, click back, and you're right back to point A, and just feel comfortable with it. And it's okay if you make a mistake and so on. And so that's kind of been the motto, but it kind of very similar way to what you're doing. It's just, hey, let's find that one tool. And you're not overloading them with tools. It's just, let's find the one that you feel comfortable with and let's really go deep with it. And
Right.
I love that. That is something that is wonderful. I just wanted to share and give a big shout out to our math content specialist, because he does something very similar to what you do, since he services K through 12, as far as math is concerned. He leverages the power of Screencastify. And what he'll actually do is he'll create reviews and he's teaching. So then he'll do the video, or he'll do a QR code and create a handout. So he creates these handouts for the Algebra 1 teachers, for any teacher, shares them out in Google Classroom so they can get it. So then the student can go ahead and work on either whatever platform opens it up on Kami. But then if they take it home and they show it to their parents, the parent can do scan the QR code and watch him teach it and understand the math, because the math, what we get is, man, this math is very different than what I learned back in my day, and it is very different now because our state is expecting them to model the math. It's not like
Yes.
just, it's not just, hey, find the quotient, find the factors and so on. It's, let's build, or hey, I'm going to give you a model and see if you can actually decipher what this model represents. And that's something that we've been able to do also through parent meetings and just informing the parents on the math. And that's really kind of helped this last year, and then this year, now that we started it again, to help inform parents. That even has calmed some of their anxiety, because they're like, we don't understand this new math, what's happening. And then
Yes.
when they see it in action, very similar to teachers, when they see that ed tech tool in action, they're like, oh, okay, I got this. So that's
Right.
wonderful.
Yes,
Uh,
that's definitely a thing I struggle with, is even like when I talk to since I'm an interventionist, I get the nice low students. And even like in kindergarten, first grade, they're like, I don't know what this means. What do we do? And so I just work through it with them, and because they don't know. And it's not their fault that we were taught differently. I remember my first year teaching third grade, and I was supposed to be teaching elapsed time on a number line. And I was like, what? How can you do time on a number line? But once I realized it was essentially just taking a round clock and flattening it out, then it made sense. But that first year or two, holy cow, I it was a big struggle.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things too that I love, and especially with math instruction, has been the use of physical manipulatives, but also now with virtual manipulatives. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
well, like Polypad is
That's my favorite.
one that is, yes. All right, high five,
Yeah,
Polypad. It is a wonderful tool because it's a great way also to bring it out to teachers, show them what can be done. And of course, with the manipulatives there, the base 10 blocks, and they've got all of that. And then also the students can practice that. And I'm not going to lie to you that since our math content specialist has shared this with the parents through his website, the parents really love Polypad, because again, making those connections. And like I said, they go to the website, they see the video, they see him explaining it, and then some parents will come to the meetings and say, hey, Mr. Palomine, I tried it out. I get it. This makes it so much easier. And then they see it and then they're saying, I wish they would have taught it to me this way
right.
instead of, the traditional algorithm, especially for subtraction or multiplication of two-digit numbers, where sometimes it just, everything would get a little convoluted there and really messy in those tight spaces. But virtual manipulatives have been something that have really helped significantly to visualize the math
Mhm.
as well. So I
I
absolutely
really
love
think it
that.
helps with the fractions, multiplying and dividing of fractions, because when I sit and think about it, I'm like, when do I ever do that? Like, other than cooking, you might have to double it or, cut it in half or whatever, but otherwise you don't do it. And so being able to actually take 4 and a third and making it 3 times, just duplicating it 3 times, it makes sense. And then you can combine things. And that's one thing I wish I would have noticed or found or knew about during the pandemic, was all of those virtual manipulatives, because I had to teach time. And so many of these houses did not have clocks.
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
so, and I wasn't allowed to give my manipulatives out because we couldn't let them be touched. And so, looking back, I'm like, man, that helps so much. And so, if a student is ill or gone for an extended time or whatever, now they have these resources at their fingertips. And it is so helpful to have those. Now, a lot of times I'd rather have the actual physical manipulatives, but you know what? It's still amazing.
Absolutely. And especially for like some districts, that it may not be cost effective depending on their budget, but to be able to have it. But you're absolutely right. I'm a big fan of having just something hands-on, being able to manipulate it, and following the concrete pictorial abstract model, having something concrete. Well, with the virtual manipulatives, you're still working with that some it's still tangible. I mean, you've got a touch screen, you're seeing the pictorial model, and then you can work your way up to the abstract. And that's something that is so important. But I wanted to add something that you mentioned, especially with clocks. And I know here in Texas, they still, when they do test, they may have or still throw some questions, I believe, maybe on time and
Mhm.
and so on. But here's what I have seen, and this is very interesting because sometimes when we'll have these benchmarks, we call them, it's like a mock practice test.
Yeah,
They
it
kind of
is.
like practice everything the way that it's supposed to be and they shut down. And so, what I'll notice sometimes is when I'm going into the hall, walking down the hall, and I'm observing, there's a student that's walking out to, go to the restroom, and I see them kind of peek out the door to see the time because there's a digital clock on
Mhm.
the outside, but because they can't read the analog clock that is inside. So I found that very interesting. I'm like, Texas, like, I mean, I know it's a skill, it's important, but I know everybody nowadays has their phones and they can tell time in that way. But I
Mhm.
get it. I just find that kind of a little bit of just funny in a way, sort
It
of.
is. The same
Yeah.
with money.
Yes. I was
Like,
like, when are they gonna change it to debit cards or, credit
yep,
cards?
yep. Now, I have a 4-year-old son, and he knows all the names of the coins because he has a piggy bank. But how many of these kids are exposed to that type of thing? And if they don't have the exposure, they don't have the background knowledge, and they don't have that connection, and they need that connection.
Absolutely. All right. So, Heather, so now as we're talking about this and of course transforming that math anxiety into excitement, I knew that you're working or currently working on a project. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about the project that you're currently working on?
Yes. So it's going through a little change currently. I am writing a book about how to change math anxiety to excitement through the use of technology. And I will be featuring different apps and things to really make that math lesson exciting. And one of my favorites has always been Canva. That's kind of what got me started. That's how Amanda Fox found me, and just kind of I skyrocketed from there. So there's definitely Canva templates in there. I also love CuraPod because what CuraPod allows you to do is when you're presenting, you can have everyone responding. It's not just those one or two students. Everyone has a chance. They can draw pictures, they can answer polls. I love using would you rather questions. So, sorry, there's a fly here. Something like, would you rather live zero point 0.5 meters from the beach or 700 meters from the ocean? Well, I said beach and ocean, probably not a good choice, from the mountains or something. And so then they have to convert those decimals to see how far away they are and then make their choice. So you get to learn about the students, what do they like, and then they have to do the math part too. And that's so much fun. I absolutely love it. Things like that.
Oh, that's great. And like you said, it's just making those connections, still using the tech and leveraging the power of the tech. And I love one thing that you mentioned, especially like a platform like CurryPod, where everyone has a chance to answer. And I think a lot of the times too, that math anxiety or actually any kind of school anxiety can just be in the classroom for somebody that may not be processing the math as quickly as that first row. And it's usually like the first row, that's where you get all the kids that raise their hand up real
Mhm.
quick or are just blurting answers. And then then you get to the third row and then the fourth row where it's a little bit more quiet and so on, because sometimes oftentimes I feel that we don't give enough students enough time for process and
Correct.
processing the math, but also even enough time for discourse and discussion. But like you mentioned, having CurryPod on there and having the ability to actually everybody be able to answer and just be able to answer in a modality that you feel comfortable with. And I love, like you mentioned, you can represent it using pictures. You can go ahead and do numbers, maybe describing it in a different way. But regardless, you're making that connection to the math, which I absolutely love, being able to have them respond in the modality that they feel most comfortable with. Just like you mentioned earlier, too, with something with Flip. I know we have a seventh grade teacher that uses Flip also, and having students explain the problem and get the thought process. And I think that's very important because as a teacher, if it's something that's teacher led, you and then you have a certain amount of time that you have for mathematics. Sometimes you got to go a little bit quicker, and you can't see, every student's thoughts, but being able to give them the ability to either verbalize or maybe create a graphic like you mentioned through Canva can help the student just get a little glimpse as to their thought process, which would help significantly in modifying any kind of instruction. So I absolutely love the tools that you're mentioning and how you're getting your students engaged. So tell me a little bit more, as far as what else we might be able to find within your amazing project that you're working on.
One of the big things I focus on in it is that yes, the math standards are important. The content standards are 100% important, and we need to make sure we teach them. However, the standards of mathematical practice, those are the ones like being able to persevere through problems and to model the math and things like that. And as I was writing this section, I remember thinking, you know what? This could actually be applied to any subject, not just math. And then I started sharing it with our reading interventionists. And I started sharing ideas to the gen ed teachers that could apply it to other things. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, especially that persevering one, because that's where we struggle right now. And so I have different ways of practicing those as well.
Oh my goodness, that is wonderful. So I love that, because again, like you mentioned, it's cross curricular, kind of just the methodology, the technique, and I'm sure, like you mentioned, so, your teachers being able to find that value in the practice, and being able to take something and be able to implement it into, or like I always like to say, take that something and sprinkle it onto what you're already doing great, and
Yes.
making it your own. And of course, at the end, it really is making sure that not only the teacher feels comfortable with the tech, number one, but also that the students are able to use that in a way that is going to make them also feel comfortable and engage them. I mean, just leveraging the power of technology is something that is wonderful and can really create those learning experiences. It's like my friend Kevin Doherty always says, you become that learning engineer. You're
Yes.
engineering that learning process. And I absolutely love it. So, as we're talking here about your book, I want to ask you though, what was that precise moment where that, light bulb moment clicked and you said, aha, this is what I want to do, that led to that book? What was that moment?
That moment was Amanda Fox saying, hey, you rock at Canva. I want you to write a book about math for Canva. And I said, I'm a math person. I'm not a writer. But I also helped edit her Canva book. She's like, oh, yeah, you are. You can do this. You've got it. And so that's what started it. And so
That
now it's just transforming bit by bit. And with the use of AI now, I'm like, I have to include that because it's such a big part of our lives and it makes our lives easier and it saves us time. Like all the personalized feedback AI can give students, or that it can save us time and then we can give that personalized feedback to the students, is just amazing to me.
Yes, absolutely. And a couple of things there that you mentioned that I absolutely love. Number one, Amanda Fox definitely knows talent. So if she came up to you and said, "Hey, you got to do this," then she's definitely got a great eye for that. So for sure, that is a non-negotiable. You're going to do it if Amanda says you can do it.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. So that's great. Number two, like you mentioned too, yes, absolutely. With everything that we're seeing right now and the possibilities of AI in education. I mean, I know we talk about it a lot. We've seen, some teachers really put it into practice and doing some amazing things. And, sometimes I think that many times teachers may feel a little overwhelmed or say, like, I don't know if it could work for math, but absolutely it could really work for anything. And I love what you mentioned, that personalized feedback, but also we were doing a show yesterday on a platform called Short Answer, but I think it's also the immediacy of feedback is so important because oftentimes, I mean, back in our day, and I'm aging myself, but when I had to get the handouts or the test back and be able to grade that and do the feedback, and then of course they take the test on Friday, so then I give it back on Monday. But by then, everything that was gone over that week is a blur because of their weekend. So then when they come back, it's that feedback is, it's like, oh, okay, well, I could have used this later on or earlier, if I
Right.
would have given it. So yes, absolutely, leveraging that power for that feedback is something that is wonderful. So I totally agree with you on that. So I'm excited and looking forward to your project and to be coming to fruition. And so might there be a possible timeline, like for our audience members, just that are anxious, that might want to get their hands on their book? Is there maybe like a timeline as far as for its release?
I'm hoping this summer
Okay,
because of us
perfect.
having to adapt it. I'm hoping for this summer.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful. And that's, yeah, summer, that is good. Sorry, I just want to give a shout out here to Tim Cavey also as well. So Tim says here, oh wow, you return test on the very next
Yes.
school day fonts. Well done.
Well,
Oh, Tim.
I could I could return the test the next day, but when they wrote their 5 paragraph essays on their historical figure for the Wax Museum, that one took a while.
Definitely, yes. But Tim, that was way back in the day. Things have changed now significantly for sure. Well, I mean, this has been great. Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me and talking about your passion, talking about your project. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. Like I said, I'm definitely a big math nerd and I absolutely love anything with math. And I know that this is definitely going to be a great tool for myself to be able to share with people in my district and be able to bring them at ease also with the possibilities that technology can bring towards math education. But most importantly, really in education altogether and trying to relieve some of that anxiety, not only for teachers, but also for students as well as we navigate these waters. And, again, tech is going to be moving very quick, but we want to make sure that our teachers are definitely well versed and we help sharpen their skills. So that's definitely a great thing. So Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate your shares. But before we go, we always love to end the show with the last three questions. So Heather, hopefully you are ready for our last three questions here. So we'll
Yes.
start off with question number one. As we know, many superheroes have a weakness, and Superman's weakness was kryptonite. So I want to ask you, in the current state of education, what would you consider to be your personal edu kryptonite?
I cannot stand toxic colleagues, like those ones that just bring other people down. It doesn't matter what you do, it's never good enough. That drives me crazy. And I'm one of those people that I'm very uplifting. If I see you do something good, I'm going to let you know. And if I see something you struggle with, I'm going to say, hey, that was awesome, but what if you try this? I'm not the type to bring people down. I'm really not.
Awesome. Great. I love
And
it.
it breaks
Great
my
answer.
heart when we do that.
Great answer, Heather. Appreciate it. All right, here we go. Question number two is, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
That one was tricky. And actually, you said something that stuck with me. And I was like, man, I actually wrote down that phrase that you said. I like get clicky with it. I think that's awesome. But before that, I had thought that turning I can't into I can, because success is a choose your own adventure. And I also edit books and layout books for teacher goals. And so I'm very into reading as well, which is funny because I'm a math teacher, but that choose your own adventure, it's your choice.
I love it. I love it. That was well put. I never thought about it. Well, just the way that you put that, I was really just really chewing on that. I was like, oh my gosh, it is a choose your own adventure.
It
That's
is.
what a success is. And I never saw it that way. But now that you shared that, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. I love that. All right, Heather, question number three. Now, question number three, it can't be your current project, okay? Because we know that
Okay.
you're working on that. So let's pretend that you're currently not working on that current project. And if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would that book be about?
It would be about how to support your fellow educators. Because, like I said, I cannot handle toxic colleagues. And so I feel like by having a book out, maybe if it got into the right hands, it might show how to support people rather than bring them down. And I feel that's so important because who wants to walk into a building that you're always on edge, walking on eggshells? And I don't think any staff member should feel that way.
Absolutely. Well, that is great. That would definitely be a great book for sure. And I know that it would probably be very well received by many. And definitely, like you mentioned, all it takes is one person to, receive that book and just really, make a change, have that impact on them. So, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. It's been a delight speaking with you and nerding out with you about mathematics. And again, for all our audience members, please make sure that you keep your eyes and ears open for this coming summer because there will be some excitement. So definitely, especially for mathematics. But like we talked about earlier, many of the things that will be found in the book can be easily, used for cross curricular activities, not just mathematics. So again, as always, make sure you grab a copy of the book, and hopefully like summer 2024 we're all going to have a copy in our hands and definitely be sharing that out. So thank you so much, Heather, for your time, your passion, your work, and everything that you do for all educators around and for the education landscape. You've been an amazing guest, and as always, anybody who is a guest on My EdTech Life always has an open invite. So maybe as the time comes near in that summer, we would definitely love to have you back so you can go ahead and present your newly released book. That way, all our audience members can definitely know a little bit more about that work and, of course, know where to find it and build some hype around it because it's definitely going to be something great. So,
For
thank you so
sure.
much. Appreciate you, Tim. We've got our friend Tim, Josh, Tanya, who stopped by too as well. And then for all of our audience members that are going to be catching this on the replay, thank you as always for making My EdTech Life what it is today. As we mentioned earlier, we do what we do for you to bring you some amazing conversations, amazing content, and wonderful, passionate guests that love to share and are just sharing these amazing knowledge nuggets that you can sprinkle onto what you are already doing great. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. But please don't forget to visit our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 240 wonderful episodes with amazing educators, education practitioners, entrepreneurs, edupreneurs, creators. There's a little bit of something there for you and for everyone. So please make sure that you check out those episodes. And if you would love to contribute to our mission of connecting educators one show at a time, please stop by our merch store where you can check out some My EdTech Life gear, and you'd be supporting the show as all of that goes back into our production so we can continue to do this week in and week out and bringing you some amazing conversations and content as well. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you all. And my friends, as always, don't forget, stay techie.